Although I am Mexican, I don't think people think I am. I do get that a lot, that I'm too white to be Mexican.
In 6th grade, they called me rice picker. So at school, I was dancing and stuff, and then this white kid, he was like, why you dancing? Shouldn't you just be doing hip hop? That made me feel bad about myself and made me feel sad.
I would say that it's never too early to start talking about racism, and we want to ground that in the fact that it's never too early to talk about race. So we might start at a very young age talking about what is race, what is nationality, why do some people look this way, why do some people look that way, what makes us unique. So communicating that message that there are these differences, and also communicating the message of valuing diversity.
We actually born and raised up in Egypt before we moved here. From the beginning, we surrounded ourselves with both. We don't only have friends from Egypt. So we create that kind of diversity circle around the kids.
Growing up, I knew my dad always said, you're native, you're native, you're native.
When our children are born in our culture, there's parts of the birthing process that get saved at the hospital. And we take those parts back home to our homestead is where their birthright comes from. And we dig a hole and we bury those items, those parts of mom. So taking them back was a whole different experience in the fact that they got to see it for their own eyes. They got to say, well, I have cousins, I have family members, I have people.
The topic of race comes up a lot in our home and at school. Their grandmother was an educator for 38 years and taught them all about civil rights, and she has a book club with the boys, and they pick all books about those topics in our history.
We do a lot of reading about race and different colors, and even honestly within my own daughters. Maddie, my oldest daughter, she's a lot more fair-skinned, and my youngest daughter's a little bit darker, so we talk about that, how every skin tone is beautiful.
So starting with those early messages, and then as children progress, as children get older, there might be more opportunities to then start thinking about how does racism happen and why does it keep happening?
Racism starts to think about those institutional policies and practices, as well as the ways in which institutions interact.
Racism is real and it exists, and that's the first step in terms of how to manage racism, because we tend to minimize it or deny it. And then we help parents, how have you managed racism? Have you felt angry and act on that? Have you felt ashamed and blame yourself? How is it that you have responded to racism? Because the way you have responded is the way you are gonna model to your kid how to respond.
I was raised in don't say that. We would never talk about racism. We keep things within our community. I raised my child completely differently. So there's a term in the Black community called the talk, where you have the talk. When you have to say, hey, guess what? You're Black. Let's talk about that. You may not have noticed. You probably didn't. Probably shouldn't have to. But you do. And that's what this means.
I tell them how to act if they ever get pulled over. Even though my child's 7, this is what happens if daddy gets pulled over. Sit still, don't move, don't talk, look straight forward.
We have to role play out loud at a very young age what to do. Let's say someone does come up to you and say, hey, where are you going? If that's your concern, let's walk through it.
I think the most important message for parents is to know that these experiences shouldn't happen to people. They shouldn't happen to your children. They shouldn't happen in the world. And yet they do. This is a nice opportunity for families to really think about what, if anything, am I going to do about this?
So really our concrete strategies are just to validate any individual response that a kiddo has to discrimination and then to restructure it in a more proactive way. Kiddos can often be coached through ways to respond proactively to discrimination. Just helping caregivers identify the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses, and then to restructure them to be more proactive is I think the most concrete way to respond to discrimination in the moment. And oftentimes kids are able to identify, right? I want to flight. I want to escape in this moment. We also coach kids through their freeze response. If you have no response in the moment, limit to that racial stressor. What can you do? You might not be able to run out of class and to disengage, but you can. For example, take a deep breath, take a pause. You can have a conversation with someone who's like-minded later on to get rid of some of that rumination or that ambiguity that exists due to a experience with discrimination.
Discrimination can be based on a lot of different things. So it can be on race, gender, sexuality, religion, disabilities, or many, many different things.
We're not the same racially. You know, I'm white and he's black. And so kids kind of harp on that and make fun. I do come from a place of privilege in a lot of different ways. So I don't feel like, especially right away, I was really equipped to even to help him a whole lot when it came to that. I almost felt like he taught me more than I taught him.
At school, he had a kid come up to him who is fully Korean and say to him, "Do you speak Korean?" And he said, "No, I know a few words, but I don't speak Korean." "Okay, well then you're not Korean." And Hansel's like really proud of his Indian culture and his Korean culture. So when someone comes up to him and questions that, it really rattles him.
There was an incident happened at school.
I was waiting in the car for the boys. You know, a bunch of boys coming in. I'm in the car, and I think one kid said,
They said something about her outfit.
"So my boys, they went to the principal."
The principal handled it very well. She brought the kid, she talked with the kid, and she made him apologize to my kids. End up this kind of act of racism and discrimination, it ends up a very good story to show that yes, there are people who might discriminate you, but there are also people who will make sure that this will not happen when you follow the right channel.
The impact of racism is that it's an attempt to your soul because it's denying who you are, and it's very important to acknowledge how devastating it can be if we don't give it a name.
So how to navigate these situations can be really challenging for a parent. So one thing we want to think about is, what was the impact on the child and what's that child's mental health? And that might give parents a sense of how much intervention is needed from their perspective, right? Or how much support this child needs. Really important, I think, for families to recognize that that there's no right answer and that they can have a different answer for each different experience.
Racism is really difficult when you have kids who want to be kids and they can't. It doesn't make them feel like they have freedom. I tell them how beautifully God complected their skin. I let them know the cool things about their hair. When it does happen, the fall won't be as great. It will still hurt, but at least they have some type of cushion where they were pre-warned about it.
Do you want to be a leaf or do you want to be a tree? You want to be a tree with roots. And your roots is your culture, your religion, your beliefs. If someone did not respect you or respect your beliefs, that's on them, not on you.